the DOJ needs to release, because the FBI and DOJ probably has evidence that they chose not to take to the grand jury, because the evidence they're in possession of would implicate other people, not Epstein or Maxwell. What we want to see are the facts and evidence that the FBI and the DOJ have never given to a grand jury.
All right, let's get off the sidelines, head into the arena. My panel is here, but first, joining us is Democratic Congressman from Virginia, Suhar Subramanyam. He is one of the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee who released those images today. Congressman, thank you very much for being here. I would ask you first, I suppose, to tell us why you selected the range of images that you did. Republicans accusing you of cherry picking to talk about Donald Trump, but he, of course, not the only high-profile man depicted in the photos you put out.
Yeah, this is just a snapshot of what we're finding. We've only been through about a fourth or a third of the 95,000 documents and images that were released to us yesterday. And so it takes some time, but this is a representative of the type of things we're seeing. I'll tell you that what we released is disturbing in and of itself, but a lot of the stuff that hasn't been released is even more disturbing and really makes my stomach churn, to be honest. And so, certainly we're trying to be mindful of how this makes the victims feel, be mindful of their privacy as well, and just trying to put out things that really the public would be of interest to the public. And so that's our concern right now, is trying to find that right balance between transparency and putting out information that's useful to the public.
What does it tell you that all of these very powerful, in some cases very wealthy men are all together doing things like, you just saw a selfie in what appeared to be a hotel room mirror of Jeffrey Epstein with one of these men. We see Bill Gates, we see Woody Allen. This seems to paint a picture of a situation that brought a lot of people into what is a very strange situation. What is this a portrait of for you?
Well, between this one and the last one showing pictures of his island, I think it's pretty clear that if you were friends with Jeffrey Epstein, if you associated with him multiple times, you knew about his crimes and you knew that something was wrong. And so, even seeing one picture with him and Steve Bannon at their desk, it almost reminds you of like an Oval Office picture, only then you see it's on Epstein's desk is a picture of a naked woman and another picture we had to black out as well. It's pretty clear that not only did Jeffrey Epstein commit these crimes, but he showed them off to his friends and associates.
Can you explain a little bit more about what you chose to redact and why? Because there have been some questions raised about the things people are not able to see because you've made those decisions to redact some portions of the images.
Yeah, absolutely. To be clear to everyone, just because someone's face was redacted doesn't mean they're a victim. It's just we don't know if they were a victim or not. We just don't recognize who they are, and we're trying to find out who they actually are. With that said, we've redacted anyone that might be a victim. In some cases, their picture with Donald Trump. And again, this is an abundance of caution, but also us trying to be transparent with everything that's going on too. And again, there's many, many photos, 95,000 images and documents in this release. So we're working as fast as we can.
One of the people obviously pictured here that we've been seeing in this carousel of images is the former president, Bill Clinton, who was also a known associate of Jeffrey Epstein. Did the committee give the Clinton family or foundation a heads up before you put that out?
I don't believe so. Again, we're not looking to shield anyone, Democrat or Republican. We are finding the evidence and we're putting it out. The only people we're really consulting with when it comes to whether or not it's appropriate to put something out is victims. And certainly we've had a good sense of which victims are okay having their name or image out there. Very few, if any, really. And so, in this case, if the Clintons have information, we want to hear it. We welcome them to come testify before a committee and clear their names. And it's the same thing with the former Prince Andrew and anyone else, Bill Gates. We want to hear from them all about what they know when it came to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes.
You mentioned at the beginning of this interview, and we've heard from your colleagues, that there's much more disturbing stuff. Disturbing seems to be the word. There were some disturbing images you released today that are of a very explicit sexual nature that we have not put in this carousel, basically on purpose, because prefer to kind of try to make this remain as much of a family program as is possible. Obviously difficult in covering this story, but can you give us an idea of what more disturbing means in this context?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about sexual acts involving potentially minors and certainly victims too, in very suggestive and compromising positions. So just to leave it at that. And I'll just say again, Donald Trump and others keep saying that they didn't know about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. But when you see Jeffrey Epstein's homes, like his mansion in New York or his island, or you see sort of the way he lived and the way he talked and the way he communicated with people, it's pretty clear that you knew that he was doing some of these things. And you either chose to hide it, ignore it, or you were participating in it yourself. And so in any case, that's why we have a lot of questions for a lot of people.
Just to put a finer point on that, do you have pictures of people engaged in sexual acts as part of this?
As part of this release, yes, there are pictures of people engaged in sexual acts.
Are there pictures of men not Jeffrey Epstein engaged in such acts?
We're going through that. Again, the last time there was a big production, what we tried to do was release all the files eventually. We're trying to be selective about what we release now. And so in this case, we're not really quite sure yet who is who. Certainly, there's a lot of people involved, though, in some of these acts.
Okay, I'm almost sorry I asked. Congressman Suha Subramaniam, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
All right, our panel is here in the arena to talk more about this. CNN legal analyst, former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams, CNN political commentator, Republican strategist and pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson, former Biden White House communications director Kate Bedingfield, and the Republican strategist David Urban. They're both CNN political commentators. Welcome to all of you. David Urban, this is disgusting. Like, it is disgusting. And you look at these pictures and it's like the leadership of the United States of America in many cases, like the tech leadership, the political leadership. Like, no wonder people